All right, here we go again, guys. Hopefully this is the last video. I plan on being back Monday. Before we go into these lessons, I just want to remind you of a few things that we've talked about and discussed in the previous lessons earlier this year and probably even in 4th grade. One of those is something called exponents. We'll use those here shortly. Remember, if that is our little number in the air, that is not asking us to say 10 times 3. There would be no reason to do that. That doesn't make that problem any shorter. What that's doing is telling us that we are multiplying our base number, which is 10, 3 times. 10 times 10 times 10, which would give us 1,000. Same thing if we had 10 to the 6th power. We would be saying 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 and times 10. We know that would equal 1 million. Next thing I want to remind you that we talked about yesterday is that numbers like this, 1/10, can also be written like this. Numbers like 100th can be written in decimal form. We will use all of these things in today's lessons. So we are going to cover 3 different lessons today. I want you to open your book up to page 27. We're going to skip already down to number 2. We will be skipping around a lot on these 3 lessons because I only want to spend time working on the ones that I feel are valuable to us. Okay, page 27 is where we should be on number 2. The first question wants us to fill in the digit blank is in the 10ths place. Well, that digit is a 5. If it is a 5 in the 10ths place, it has a value. We cannot just say of 5. We have to look at the value. So since it's in the 10ths, it has a value of 5/10. You also could have written it like that. Either one of those would have worked. That should say or. Okay, the 7, now we're looking for the 7, is in the 1s. I'm going to try to write that real little in there. The 1s place. If you had 7 $1 bills, you would have $7. Okay, now we are looking for what is in the 10s place. In the 10s place, we find a 3. If you had 3 10s, that would give you a value of 30. Now, it doesn't tell us the digit or the place, but it does tell us the value. And I see that I am 3 spots behind the decimal. So if there's my decimal and I go 1, 2, 3, that puts me in the 1,000ths place. So I have a digit of 4 in the 1,000ths. Now I'm going to try to write that super tiny. Okay. And the digit 9 is in the 100ths. I'm just going to write it underneath there because it doesn't feel like I can fit it in. And it has a value of 9/100ths. This is not a whole number, so I definitely need a decimal. 9/100ths. Okay. Next, we're going to look at this one. It gives us the word form, and we are going to write it in decimal form. If you remember back to when we first started talking about this, when we talk about word form, anytime you see one specific word, I want you to circle it. Can you remember what that word is? It is and. Because and is letting me know that there is a decimal. It should only show up in our word form one time. So whatever is in front of that, 12, is what's in front of my decimal. I go ahead and put my decimal down. Next, I have 362 thousandths. Thousandths lets me know that there will be 3 spots behind my decimal. 3 6, 2. I can fill each one of those in. Okay. 25 and, I see that and, I'm going to circle it, 39 thousandths. I know I've got a decimal. In front of that decimal is 25. Behind that decimal is 39 thousandths. It's really tempting just to write 39. However, I read that it goes all the way to thousandths. Remember, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. That means that thousandths is where my 39 has to end. So I will need a 0 there. 70 and 608 thousandths. We have a decimal. In front of it, we have 70. Behind it, we have 608 thousandths. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So that is what our 608 is going to look like. Okay. Keep going to number 6. On number 6, we are shown the decimal. We want to write it as a mixed number. Remember, a mixed number is a whole number that has a fraction with it. We know these are going to have fractions because remember, wherever our decimal is, whatever's in front of it is our whole number. 6, 13, 74, 90. Now I'm also going to need to turn the rest of that into a fraction. Okay, so I know I'm going to have a fraction. Put that in the top. Now I got to figure out what am I putting it over. Well, I have tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Same thing here. Behind it, we've got 18. I don't need that 0. I've got tenths, hundredths, thousandths. And this one, 481 thousandths. And on this one, 302 thousandths. Okay, so now we're going to take it over here, and remember, this is where we're going to go back to the beginning where we talked about the fact that our decimals and fractions can all kind of be written interchangeably. So, when I come here, it wants us to put this in expanded form. I have 6, right there, 2 tenths, and now I need to figure out what to do with the rest of those. I know that 7 is in the hundredths, so I would write it like that. And the thousandths would look like that. Okay, I'm going to move to the next one. I've got 10. Remember, our expanded form is where we take that number and we stretch it out into all of the different place values. So I have 10 right there. My next one is in the ones. That tells me I have 3. My next number, there was not a 0 there, but I have 1, which is in my hundredths. And then I have 8 in my thousandths. Instead of writing as a decimal, I wrote it as a fraction. There's really no reason why they choose to write it as a decimal sometimes or a fraction other times. Okay? 7 times 10 gives me 70. This one is a super stretched out expanded form. Now we want to look at the 4. That place value is the ones. So they want you to write 4 times 1. Now I'm going to go my next place value. That is in my tenths. So they are saying you have 4 copies of 1/10. And on to the next one. The 8 is in my hundredths. So I have 8 copies of 1/100th. And then finally, I've got a 1 in my thousandth. So I have 1 copy of 1,000th. And on the last one, we have 9 copies. That is in my tens of 10. We don't have anything in the ones, so we're just going to ignore that. Come over here. We have 3 tenths. This time they're writing it as a decimal. There's no reason for them to do that. They just picked whichever one they liked best. I don't have to worry about my hundredths. There's nothing there. The 2 is in my thousandths, so I'm going to put thousandths. Okay, next I want to skip over to number 12. Mr. Evans asked his class to write 15 and 640 thousandths in decimal form. Consider Lisa's number and Scott's number. When they say consider in a word problem, that just means look at it, think about it. Explain why both Lisa and Scott are correct. So the problem is telling us they are correct. Do not write a sentence telling me that you agree with one person and not the other. They are both correct. If we were to write Lisa's number down here on my place value chart, it would look like that. And if I were to write Scott's number down there, it would also look like that. So what I notice is that all of their digits have the same value. All of the digits have the same value. They don't need that extra 0 at the end. It is not needed in this case. Lisa could have left it off. Okay, we are going to move into lesson 4. There's only a couple problems that I really want to talk about on this one, so we won't do very much of it. I want to start by turning to page 38. And we're going to go all the way down to number 5. Okay, so the first thing we want to see is, I added a place value chart here because I think it's really beneficial. We are going to look at the number shown. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come down here and I'm going to write that number right in here in my place value chart. And it wants to know the value of the boxed digit, which is this 5 right there. I see that's in my hundredths place value, so I know that is the value of that is 5 hundredths. That would be the same as like 5 pennies. Then I want to know the underlined value. Okay, then, oh, sorry, that one was boxed. The next one is underlined. That 5 is in the thousandths. So that would be 5 thousandths. Means it would take 1,000 of those pieces just to equal 1. So we're going to look at letter C, and it wants us to complete the equation that shows the relationship there. Okay, so what I see here is that I multiplied something by 10. So if I'm multiplying by a whole number, I am getting bigger. And it wants us to show here that if we had 5 thousandths and we multiplied it by 10, we would get 5 hundredths. Because we're saying that this boxed in 5 is 10 times larger than the underlined one. Okay? Then when I go look at the next one, I'm multiplying by 1/10, which is a fraction. When I multiply by a fraction, that is the same thing as dividing by a whole number. Multiplying by 1/10 is the same thing as dividing by 10. I am getting smaller. I'm saying 1/10 of that. So I know that the last one is smaller. If I say I have 5 hundredths times a tenth, I am going to end up with 5 thousandths. I know that's confusing, and we will keep working on it. Okay, move to number 6. We have a number again. I'm going to go ahead and write that down on my place value chart, just because it helps me. If you don't have a place value chart, you can always just draw one. What is the value of the underlined digit? Well, in this one, this is my underlined digit. I see it's in the tenths, so we're going to say it is 2 tenths. Draw a box around the digit that has a value that is 1/10 as much. If something is 1/10 as much, it is smaller. If you are eating 1/10 of something, you are eating a tiny piece of it. So 1/10 as much is telling me I am going backwards. If I'm going to draw a box around that, that is the one I am drawing a box around. So then they want us to write an equation. We are going to say that if we started with 2/10 and took 1/10 of that, we would end with 2/100. Okay, now we are going to move over to lesson 5. I told you we were going to be skipping around and getting through a few lessons today. Lesson 5, you're going to turn to page 45. We're going to start right up here on number 1. We are going to look at how these things move up and down the place value chart, okay? So we start right here and see that we have 5, oh, that highlighter's not the best to see. Let me get a different one. We have 5/100ths. So right there, this is showing 5/100ths. We're saying we multiplied by something. Well, if I went 1, 2, 3, that's saying 10, 100, 1,000. We multiplied by 1,000. And now we want to know what is our new number. Well, to do that, we scooted those over the 3 spots, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in our tens. That would give us 50. Now, we are still looking at the same problem, but what they want to look at is they want to change the way that we write 1,000. We know that 1,000 could also be represented like this, times 10, times 10, times 10. So we could decompose that to be times 10, times 10, times 10. We still ended up with 50. And the last one, they wanted you to use an exponent. Well, we multiplied 10 times 10 times 10. That is 10 to the 3rd power. We're still ending up with 50. Okay, let's move over to number 2. We are going to start here with 9/10. I'm going to go ahead and write that in my place value chart. I'm multiplying by 10 to the 2nd power. That tells me I'm multiplying by 10 times 10. So, to do that, I'm going to ignore that 0. He's not really important right now. I'm going to take this 9 and I'm going to go times 10 times 10. And I know his new home is going to be right there. I can't leave this little space empty, so I'm going to fill in a 0. That tells me my answer would be 90. Okay, let me reset my place value chart for the next one. This time we are starting out with 1,000th, all the way at the end. We're multiplying by 10 to the 4th power. I know 10 to the 4th power is going to be 10,000. So again, I'm not really worried about these zeros there. I'm going to start with the first digit that has a value. So I'm going to go times 10, times 10, times 10, times 10. So I know that 1 is going to end right there. We can't leave him empty, so we need 10. Okay, let me reset. Okay, on the next one, we are multiplying by 10 to the 3rd power. Remember, that's 10 times 10 times 10. We're starting with 1 7/10. I'm going to start with this 1, and I'm going to multiply times 10 times 10 times 10. The home of the 1 is right here now. The 7 also comes with it. I can't separate them. They're going to stay the same. They move up and down. So he just falls in the place right behind the 1, just like he did before. We have some empty values. Our new answer is 1,700. Okay. Number 5 says, determine the power of 10. Remember, our power is our exponent that will make this statement true. We started with 4 6/100ths, and we ended with 4,060. So I see that my number got bigger, so I know I'm multiplying, and it tells me I'm multiplying. So I'm just going to check. 1 place value, 2 place value, 3 place value. So that tells me I multiplied by 10 3 times. So it would be 10 to the 3rd power. Okay, we are going to move on to page 47, I believe. Okay, and I put our little multiplication mushroom up here. Because remember we talked about yesterday, when we multiply, what's happening is we're getting larger. We're taking the same number and it's just getting larger. We're not only taking part of that number and making it larger, all of it's getting larger. So when we started here, we had 7/10 right here. We multiplied by 10 times 10. Okay? And we ended with 7 in our tens. That is going to equal 70. On here, they want to know what is 10 times 10. Well, it's 100. So that's still going to equal 70. And the way we write 100 with an exponent is 10 to the 2nd power. Okay, again, we are multiplying our mushrooms, so we're getting bigger here. This time we started all the way down here with 5/1000ths, very tiny pieces, but we multiplied by 1,000. So we're going to fill that in and see where it landed us. Times 10, times 100, times 1,000. That moved all 5 of those into the ones. That is going to look like 5. I want to know how could I write that with an exponent? Well, 1, 2, 3. 10 to the 3rd power. Our answer is still 5. Okay, moving on to number 3 and 4. This time we had to bring out our Goomba because, unfortunately, sometimes we have to go the other direction, down here towards the Goomba. And we know that when Mario runs into the Goomba, he shrinks. He doesn't lose an arm, and everything else stays the same. Everything about him shrinks. That is what happens when we divide. So we started off here with 4/10, right here in our tenths, and we divided by 100. So we went back times 10 times 10, and that 4 ended up in the thousandths. Oh, that's really hard to see. Let me try to write that again. Okay. So the next line wants us to change that 100 into being written with a exponent. Well, count your zeros. That is going to tell you 10 to the 2nd power. And our answer stays the same. Next, we're starting with 20. That tells me I've got 2 in my tens. And we are dividing by 1,000. So that is divided by 10, divided by 10, divided by 10. And that takes me to have 2 in my hundredths. If I want to write that 1,000 with an exponent, that is going to be 10 to the 3rd power. And my answer stays the same. Okay, we've got one more I want to complete with you. We're going to skip over number 6 and maybe number 5, and we're going to look at this problems down here, 7 through 12. Okay, we are going to fill these in on my chart. 327 thousandths times 10. Well, multiplying by 10 just increases us 1 place value. So that is going to be 3 27 hundredths. I'm not going to write on the line because it's super tiny. Okay, the next one, I am saying I had 5 and 4/100ths. And we are dividing by 10. That means dividing is going backwards. Only by 10, so I'm going back one place value. Everything in that number comes back with me. Just like that. Now we have 504 thousandths. Okay, we're going to start the next one off with 1 and 68/100ths. I see we are multiplying, so I know I'm getting larger. I'm multiplying by 10 to the second power, so that tells me times 10 times 10. I'm going to scoot everything about that number up 2 spots, which gives me 168. Okay. Next, we start with 3/10. We are dividing here. That means we are losing value. We are going back 10 to the second power. That is 2 spots times 10, or divided by 10, divided by 10. I keep saying that. We have 3/1000ths. Okay, number 11, we have 2 and 109/1000ths. We're going to multiply by 10 to the third power. That tells us we're going up 10 times 10 times 10. That is our new home of the 2. Everything moves up with it. So our new answer is 2,109. Okay, and finally, our last one is 45 divided by 10 to the third power. Dividing, we are losing that value. Divided by 10, divided by 10, divided by 10. I can't leave that space open. I have to fill in the 0. 45 thousandths. Okay, that is all I have for you today. So I hope that you are doing your work, keeping up. Remember to go check in your Khan Academy and keep moving forward. I did move you in Zern, so your lessons may be looking a little different. And I will see you Monday. Bye.